Artist.
Father.
Yes. And Jeff's also done some work with funeral homes. So when I picked up on the end of life doula, I was like, I got to talk to him more about this, because if I just had this incredible human experience with this person, and he has these human experiences with people, and I've grown up in healthcare for 24 years. I've worked in healthcare and had many experiences with people at their end of their life. You don't come across somebody who has such a normal, I don't want to use the word normal because what's normal anyway, but who has a perspective on death that's maybe similar to my perspective on death. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So
perhaps.
Well, we haven't gotten into it yet, but my perspective on death is that we don't know, like the conversation about losing someone is very difficult to go through. The conversation about being diagnosed and then, talking to people about a terminal diagnosis is something that's very taboo. And, we celebrate birth, we celebrate coming into the world, but we don't have the same views, at least in our culture, in North American culture. We don't have the same sort of celebration or focus first of all, how many times have you done this with somebody? Like, do you know how many times you've helped someone go through their end of life experience?
I'm not entirely sure.
But it's a lot.
Yeah. It's a fair bit. Over a couple dozen.
Over a couple dozen? Okay. Yeah. And so what was it that drew you to becoming an end of life doula? How does that even happen?
My mom actually had a lot of influence on that. She would always take care of people within the community. Whenever something was happening, she'd visit them.
Through the church or just?
Typically through the church, right? So she'd do some praying with them. She would bring them food, comfort them, whatever, right? So I started to kind of see that, and more and more folks that I started to know started to get sick. So I always felt that they could deserve a little bit of attention, maybe, someone just to kind of talk to outside of their own family, who can come in without having too much of an emotional attachment, who can let them have their emotional moment without feeling bad about it. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of how it started. Mm-hmm. And then eventually I met some folks and they're like, "You're a death doula." I'm like, "What?"
We bonded. And I thought that it was very interesting because our connection was, at least in my mind, I was thinking, being the project manager of the morgue, I've had many, 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 many interactions with families who are having that last experience with their loved one. And then, the conversations that are had after somebody passes away. I have noticed, when somebody passes away in the hospital, how impersonal, I guess, sometimes it can seem, and how, especially during COVID times, there was times when, people would be dying and we weren't even allowed to let the family come in and be with the person when they were dying. And, how deeply I struggled with having to make those decisions.
That was tough for a lot of folks.
Oh my gosh. And, how many people there are who do die alone.
Yeah.
It's remarkable to me how many people die alone with no one.
Yeah.
So I think, this whole concept of an end of life doula, did you have to take training? Like, did you take a certificate?
So I paired up with some folks in the States. They had been running a program for a while.
Okay.
Went through them. It had to kind of translate everything to understand our medical field a little bit more, and just how our hospices and everything work. But yeah, I did my training with them. And then from there, it kept evolving, because there is a fair bit to know in terms of, okay, how do you explore this idea of death in other cultures? What do they do? Which is why I became a funeral director after the fact, because eventually I started talking with the BAO, the Bereavement Authority of Ontario.
I know them well, yeah.
So, yeah. And they had suggested, just because of how close I was starting to get with folks, They're like, if this is what your goal is, because my whole thing is I want to take care of the person while they're alive, but I also would like the opportunity to transfer them and then bring them to their final resting spot. So at that point, that's when they're like, just to save yourself a little bit of potential hassle, depending on where things go, get your license and then see where it goes.
What do you have to do to get a license to be a funeral director?
So here in Ontario, you go to Humber.
Okay.
And then it's about a 3-year by the time you finally get your full license, right? You have to do a little bit of portion at school, obviously. And then you have
do
to
a placement?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. So, yeah, did that.
3 years. Okay. Wow. And in terms of funeral director, did you ever have to do body releases from the hospital?
Yes.
Yeah. And what in your opinion, like when you go to a morgue and do a body release, what is that experience like? Here, let me reframe my question. Do you find a morgue to be a good place for a family member or a loved one to see their, person after they've been through something in the hospital and they've died? Do you think a morgue is a good place for them to see their loved one?
No, probably not.
Why? Why do you think that? I agree with you, but I'm curious to know why you think that.
Because there are other folks in there as well. So there's
sometimes lots of other deceased people.
Yeah. So it's definitely not the most comfortable thing. And I think you take away from that personal touch, right?
And the viewing rooms in hospitals, like any hospital you've ever done a body release, do they have a decent viewing room or anything?
Again, it's very clinical, so it doesn't, it just has this particular feel, let's say.
It's very cold.
Yes.
Well, the morgue is cold. They have to keep it cold.
But sanitized, and it just doesn't feel like, and it should be, but, if you're trying to make that connection with an individual, then it's not always so comforting. It's not comforting.
No, it's not. Yeah. And then, how do you say that to the family? Like, well, you don't want to see what they just want to see their loved one. And, it's hard to...
They get distracted. For them, that's the only thing they're thinking about.
Yeah. I've had many, many times when I've had to, coach the family to say, you want the last time you see your loved one to be in a place where you feel comforted and safe and, warm. And like, this is not, it's a very sterile, very, like, as you say, very clinical environment. And when, there's potentially other bodies in the morgue, right?
Yeah.
It's a big deal.
Yeah.
Have you ever had to do a body pickup from a tragic death or like how I guess I could just say this, like from a homicide or a suicide or anything like that?
No. Okay. Obviously, we
Usually
still see them, but
you still see them after the fact.
Yeah, but never from the particular scene. No.
Is there any particular type of circumstance that you can recall off the top of your head where it made you feel like we're doing something wrong in North American culture with how we deal with death? Like, are there circumstances that come to your mind when you think about how we in North American culture deal with death? How, our morgues are so clinical and how, people dying in community versus people dying in hospital. Like, is there anything that comes to your mind when you think how we deal with death currently that we could be doing better?
Yeah, tons.
Well, let's talk about it. What do you think? Like, what stands out to you as being the most important?
We sometimes fabricate this lie of how much time we want to give people. And, it's a business. So for them, they definitely want it. And if they're busy, they have to schedule things. So there is sometimes this idea of, even though they might say, take as much time as you want, they're also like, okay, when's the next family going to be coming in?
How much does the average funeral cost?
Boy, so you're easily 7,000 to 8,000.
Just for like a basic thing, right?
Very basic, very basic. I was actually talking to my parents yesterday, and they want to pre-plan for our family.
Good for them.
Yeah, which is actually a really good thing to do just because of the inflation costs and everything like that. But
it's also an incredible thing to do for your family, so that when your family is grieving and sad for your loss, that they're not like your family is not then having to plan how to bury you. Like it's already done for the family.
I like that part of it because it's, here's what my wishes are. This is what I would like.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I have seen some cases where someone comes along and they're like, okay, this person wants a very, big traditional type of funeral. And then they flip it and they're like, just a cremation.
Oh, right. And that can be considered financial abuse of power of attorney.
Yeah. There's so many things wrong with that part of it. Again, it's just that, where are we? Why can't that stick? And where does the power lie? Mm-hmm. Thankfully, I haven't had to experience that. A whole lot.
What about how many people come to you who don't have a plan? Like, it's incredible that your parents are being proactive, but would you say that there's a certain percentage of people who come in when they've lost someone and they're like, we have no idea what they want. We have no idea. We never talked about it.
And that's generally the case. Mm-hmm. So usually that's what you'll run into, is a lot of folks will come in and they just want to know, okay, what do I do? Mm-hmm. They're trying to put it together themselves, and they want to be respectful to the individual and the rest of the family as well. And there's a lot of, okay, well, what is this going to look like in the public eye? Mm-hmm. Right? There's so much stress around that, which I think sometimes puts people in a position to sometimes go bigger than they need to, which is nice because you can simplify things for them and just be like, look, this is the path. This is all you need to really worry about. Don't try to make it too big. Mm-hmm. Bring it down.
Because it's really for you. It's not for the person who's passed. Like, the person who's passed is passed. So whatever it is you're pulling together for